question raised by the leader of the opposition, and in some ways it's a philosophical question about climate justice, where the leader of the opposition said, as I've been saying since I was co-chair of the Committee for Climate Financing with Prime Minister Trudeau, appointed by the Secretary General to deal with this issue of climate change, that, of course, small island developing countries like Jamaica are not the main contributors to the issues of climate change, but yet we bear the cost of it. Our emissions clearly could not be attributed as a cause for the warming of the oceans globally, or the melting of the ice sheets in the poles, or the destruction of corals, or rising sea levels. Jamaica's carbon footprint is negligible. But you know, Madam Speaker, I am a strong advocate for climate justice. But the difference between myself and the leader of the opposition is you don't know what I'm going to say. You don't know what I'm going to say. The difference between myself and the leader of the opposition is that I am not expecting the international community to give Jamaica anything.
The Prime Minister is attributing a point of view or a remark to me, which is false. I have never said that the international community can be expected to give us anything. I know the world we're living in. I was pointing out the injustice of it, and the fact that it's because of the injustice of it that we're going to have to be taking on this massive amount of additional debt to try and dig ourselves out of this hole. That's the point I was making.
Madam Speaker, I accept the point of clarification, but there was no point of order. But the clarification attempted by the leader of the opposition. Madam Speaker, my recollection of the leader of the opposition statement is that they are only giving us $12 million in grants. With all that we need, all that they're going to give us. Let me say this, Madam Speaker. Yes, there is an injustice in the climate change issues that small island developing states in particular are faced with increasing in terms of frequency, in terms of intensity, and in terms of the overlapping of disasters that have an impact on our balance sheet as a country. And the argument is that rich countries that have benefited from using carbon fuels, carbon-based fuels, should compensate. But me being your Prime Minister, the position I take is that until then, Jamaica must be able to stand on its own 2 feet, develop itself, and how do we, as a small nation, Madam Speaker, stand on our own 2 feet? The leader of the opposition's argument is that we are going to have to borrow to do this recovery. Now, I want to know, hold on, that's what he said. No. The leader of the opposition made the point that we are going to have to borrow to do the recovery. And you have made the exact point. Yes. So what else would we have to do? What else would we have to do? Which shows you the inconsistency of his arguments. But here is the problem now, Madam Speaker. How do we borrow? If it were 20 years ago, 30 years ago, we would not be able to approach the IFI. We wouldn't even be able to approach the international community. But But Madam Speaker, even if we were able to approach the international community, it would not be on concessionary terms. It would not be in a structured way as this. Madam Speaker, every country borrows. The real issue is, what are the terms on which you borrow? And it is the first time in a long time, in over 50 years, that Jamaica is able to approach the international community and be able to get these loans at concessionary and structured rates. Madam Speaker, I can be clear. I can be clear with the House that our preferred approach is to engage with the international financial institutions, because invariably their terms are much better than private markets, and they support technical development, and they engage a structured program. So it is better for Jamaica to engage the financial community in this way. Madam Speaker, we are only able to do this, because we have demonstrated that Jamaica is a good steward with its own resources and a good steward with resources that we have borrowed. That good stewardship, Madam Speaker, the signal of that is that we have been able to consistently reduce our debt to the point where we were almost at 60% of GDP. The international community, looking on at this, says this is a responsible government with which we can partner and lend almost 20 to 30% of its GDP. Now, the question is, as the leader of the opposition pointed, we're going to have to borrow all this money. We're going to have to borrow all this money, and it is going to increase our debt to GDP ratio. The answer is yes, the debt to GDP ratio will increase. But what are you going to do with the money? If you don't use the money wisely, then you are stuck with high debt. If you use the money wisely, you can expand your GDP and pay back your debt, and you're in a better position. And that is why, so I'm coming out to the question of NARA, of setting up NARA. And the member from St. Catherine Southeast asked about the Marshall Plan for recovery, and that has been, mentioned. So, from a week after the disaster, we anticipated this, and we decided that we would have to establish an entity that will be able to use the funds as quickly as they become available. Because a part of the discussion with the IFIs is that the funds have to be made available at a fairly rapid pace. In other words, it couldn't follow the elongated processes. So we had to establish a new entity, and this entity, to answer the question asked by, I believe it was the leader of the opposition, somebody else, the member from South Manchester, what will be the form? What form will the entity take? This is where we are now in terms of studying the various options available for its structure. Should it take an executive agency form? Should it become a statutory entity? What will the legislation look like? These are questions that are now being studied. We sought the advice and assistance of the World Bank in doing the conceptual note. We're out of that phase, and now the Attorney General's chambers and all the other legal experts are now looking at what legal form it will take. I will reserve my comments because I don't want what I say influence the advice that is given. But we want an entity that is nimble, can move very quickly, that complies